Welcome to the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. I'm Coach Lisa Callahan, a recovered emotional eater. I ended decades of self-inflicted struggles with food through taking a journey of self-discovery, which revealed the secrets of what was going on underneath the food. Throughout this podcast, we'll explore topics that are rarely talked about, like low self-esteem, lack of confidence, people-pleasing, and decades of self-sabotaging behaviors. Rather than just focusing on the food, we'll dive deeper into aspects of who you are as a person and how you ended up relying on food for comfort to begin with. My mission is simple: to empower women to regain their confidence and prioritize self-love, regardless of the number on the scale. Discover what you've really been craving, and trust me, it's not about the food. This podcast is based on insights shared from the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group on Facebook, so be sure to check out the show notes for the link to the group and a complimentary gift just for you. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hey, welcome to another fun and insightful episode of the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. The topic today is 5 common problems that emotional eaters struggle with. Now, we didn't just pick random problems. What we did was we took a survey from our Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group on Facebook, and we asked our members what they were struggling with the most. And then we chose 5 of the most common problems so that we could talk about them here live on our session today. So I'm really excited to dive in. As always, this is an interactive podcast. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, you're probably going to want to write some stuff down. And I want you to put on your open mindset thinking cap right now, because some of the problems that we got from this survey here are probably problems that you're struggling with as well. Now, the one thing that you might have learned so far with listening to our podcast, and if this is your first episode, that's totally cool. I would like to inspire you to go back and listen to all of the episodes, because each one is unique in how we frame the thought process around emotional eating. So we do things really different here than most mainstream podcasts that talk about emotional eating do, because I am a recovered emotional eater myself. And when I hear some of the problems that these women are sharing that they're struggling with, I know what that feels like. And let me say this, it feels horrible. But the thing is that all of the mainstream suggestions on how to fix these problems, they don't really work, because a lot of those solutions for these problems that you're going to hear in a few minutes from now, they're all surface level solutions. And when the person who's feeling that this is a problem, they feel like it could be fixed with one of these surface level solutions. And when I say surface level solutions, I think you know what I mean. I mean diets. I mean meal plans. I mean weight loss. I mean, counting calories and, going to, bed at 8 p.m. so that you can avoid feeling like you have to raid the refrigerator all night. I mean avoiding the root cause of the problem and just coming up with these surface level solutions and torturing yourself for as long as you can while you want to use those surface level solutions to fix a deep rooted problem. And so the problems that you're going to hear today, I'm certain that they're probably common for you as well. I know they were common for me. And yet years ago, if you had heard me as a coach, because I was a personal fitness trainer and I was a coach, and I coached nutrition a lot, and I put people on diets, and I had all kinds of weight loss groups and, body fat measurements, and we're going to weigh in on Monday. And that's what I did for years. And so when I hear these problems of these women, I know as a coach what I would have suggested to them, let's say 10, 15 years ago. And I'm so happy to bring you this podcast today, because I really want to inspire you to become an outside thinker, like an out of the box thinker. Because I promise you, when you hear these problems that these women are struggling with, you're going to see yourself in them, number one. And number two, the solution that you're going to come up with is probably more leaning towards the mainstream. Well, just don't buy it. Don't bring it in the house. Take a different route home so that you don't have to pass that donut shop. Just tell yourself no. Or maybe, do it on a cheat day. It's like, well, you can eat great all week and then you'll have that cheat day. And so there's so many of these solutions that basically keep us married to the problem. And when we actually want to fix the root cause of the problem and actually fix it for good, we don't think we're allowed to. Like, we don't even think we can. So the problems that we're struggling with, they feel like they're lifelong. If you haven't gone through all of the podcast episodes, there's one in particular that I think you'll really like. It's about self-awareness. And when you hear in that podcast, and I am sad I don't remember what episode it is, it might be number 10. But if you look it up and you just look through the podcast listings, you'll see it. And that one talks about the difference between being aware, where you're like, okay, I am self-aware. I'm recognizing where I could be the one thing standing in my own way. I'm acknowledging that I am only going to be a solution for myself if I recognize that I'm the one thing standing in my own way of solving this problem. If you're blaming anything, genetics, your partner, your work situation, your schedule, your heritage, on why you're struggling with these problems that you feel are from food, then you'll probably end up staying stuck for quite some time. But in this episode, I want to give you the most 5 common problems that we hear. And then I want to help you to zoom out and take a wider perspective so that you can really see that these problems are solvable, and they're not going to be solvable through surface level solutions because they're not surface level problems. The thing is that when we think that we're an emotional eater, or we think we're, binge eating, or like food calls our name, or all that stuff, we're basically steering ourselves towards the direction of, feeling like we're stuck in this problem forever. And so we're coming up with these surface level solutions, thinking that we can just make ourselves feel better for the moment, but not to actually fix the root cause of the problem. And when you're listening to this podcast today, I want you to keep an open mind. And if you've got that pen and paper handy, you can write this down. This is the first thing to write down. A closed mind cannot accept any new ideas. So write your name down on your piece of paper and just say your name, open your mind. And as soon as you start to do that, you'll start to ignite a new energy within yourself that you may not have had just 5 seconds before when you didn't write that down. Like, you're giving yourself an instruction, and you're also giving yourself permission to open your mind. Because if you tell yourself, well, Coach Lisa, you just don't know me. That's not how I am. This is how I am. Then you're going to be the one thing standing in your own way. And we have to be able to open space for that first before we can solve the root cause of the problem. All right, so let's dive in. So our first question comes from Sarah S. And her question is, how to love myself enough to stop binge eating and sabotaging my confidence. So Sarah, thank you so much for this question. And it seems like it's such an obvious answer. It's like, well, if you can just, get through it and lose your first 15 pounds, then you'll feel more confident. And if you're feeling more confident, you'll want to, take better care of yourself. So therefore, you'll be able to love yourself more and you'll get more confidence. So this is what I feel like I would have to do in the past. I would feel like, well, if I don't lose the weight, how am I going to get confident? Like, that doesn't seem how is that going to happen? Right? Like, I'm not confident because I feel like I've got this extra weight on me. And if I don't lose the extra weight, then I'm not going to be able to feel confident. Therefore, I'm not going to be able to love myself. Therefore, I will keep self-sabotaging. And I know that in my past, like this is what I would think. And that's why I always felt so stuck, because I was like, well, if I lost the weight or if I could keep it off forever and ever and ever, and I never had to worry about it again, then I would feel confident and then I wouldn't self-sabotage. But I felt all backwards with this. And the reason why I felt all backwards with this was because I didn't consider the fact that I could be me as I am, like right now, no matter what. If I, have extra weight on my body, it's because weight is a symptom of an underlying problem. And if I could actually stay focused and connected on meeting myself right where I'm at today, then I could give myself permission to love myself enough to make really solid decisions for myself. And as I do that, then I will gain confidence in my trust in myself. So we always think that confidence is like outside of ourselves, like that person who's kind of like loud in the room. Like we look at them and we sort of long for that sort of confidence, just to be able to like walk in a room and just say what you want to say or do what you want to do. And like, it's so great to have that confidence. But the thing is that we're just assuming that a person who like externally looks like they're the loudest person in the room, we're just assuming that that person has confidence. And so that's really us being an unreliable narrator of someone else's story. So the first thing I would say, Sarah, is to bring this into the idea that you'll always get more of what you focus on. So if your focus is on telling yourself that you do not love yourself right now enough to stop sabotaging, and then because you're not able to love yourself enough to stop sabotaging, that's why you have no confidence, I would really like you to change your mindset about the fact that you don't love yourself enough right now. Think about it like this. If you had a neighbor who asked you for help and you were like, no problem, I'd love to help you. Absolutely. And you walk up to her house and she opens the door and she takes a rock and she throws it at your head. And then she's like, can you help me? And you're like, oh, wow, that hurt. I guess so. And then you kind of go back to her again and she throws a rock at your head again. And you're like, hold on a minute. Aren't you asking me for help? Yeah, of course I am. Please help me. I want you to help me. And you're like, well, then stop throwing a rock at my head. And she can't. She just can't. She just keeps throwing it at your head. And you're like, at some point, you're going to be like, whoa, lady, I don't want to help you anymore. And so the thing is if you're the one that's telling yourself that you don't love yourself enough to stop self-sabotaging, well, then you're going to have to put the rock down first, because why would you want to help yourself if you're sabotaging your own best interest? Like, it doesn't work that way, Sarah. It just doesn't. So what you're going to have to do, and please know, please know that this is not your fault. And when you're saying it, right, this question came in and it's not necessarily just from Sarah. We took her specific question, but this came in a lot where it was like, how do I stop self-sabotaging? You're going to have to put that desire inside of you to love yourself and meet yourself right where you're at first. So that way you can make decisions that are kind and loving to yourself right now before you ever shed, that weight. And know that if you shed the weight, that you're not instantaneously going to have that confidence that you might desire from being the loudest person in the room. Confidence is not something that you just like, it's not like a light switch. And you can't always see it from the outside, not unless you're comparing yourself to another person and you're looking at them and you're like, oh man, they have so much confidence. I wish I had that. Well, guess what? You don't know what that other person is feeling. And the more you look outside of yourself to peer into someone else's world, the less you're going to be able to focus on yourself. So just remember that. If you are jumping into someone else's lane, looking at them, wishing that you had more of what they have, and that you feel like the only way for you to feel confident in yourself is to lose that weight, but weight is a symptom of an underlying problem, and yet you're not taking that rock out of your hand and stop hitting yourself in the head with it long enough to treat yourself well, we got it all backwards. So step one for you is going to be, I want you to meet yourself right where you're at so that you can accept yourself here and know that something brought you here. You didn't just wake up this way. You weren't just born like this. And just know that when you're feeling like you're not loving yourself enough to be able to stop self-sabotaging, that's your first thought that you've got to put down. Because if that is true, that means that you're judging yourself, and judgment is always fear-based. So when you get caught up in fear-based thoughts, you'll not be able to have a fresh perspective unless you put down the thought. Now, you might ask me, well, Lisa, I've been thinking this for 30, 40, 50 years. How do I put down the thought? Easy. You just tell yourself to stop thinking it. And if you can give yourself a command like that and follow through with it, I don't care if it's 10 seconds. If you say to yourself, you know what? Actually, that thought is mean. Stop thinking that. 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 And you just keep telling yourself that over and over and over again, then what'll end up happening is that you'll get a little clearing where instead of thinking that thought of like, I don't love myself enough, you're thinking, stop thinking that. So therefore, you will get a break from you taking a rock and smashing it into your own head. Step one is to stop telling yourself that you're binge eating because you don't love yourself enough. And then we'll have some room for growth. This may seem simple and it may seem complex. It's really going to be dependent on you deciding to open your mind. So remember, again, a closed mind cannot accept any new ideas. So if you're the one that's like, but no, Lisa, I have to keep telling myself this. Ask yourself why. Who says you have to keep telling yourself this? Who is saying in your head that you have to keep telling yourself that you don't love yourself enough, and that's why you have to binge eat? Like, who's giving you those instructions? And so make certain that you know that if your thoughts are the very same thoughts that are meant to keep you stuck, that you will stay stuck standing in your own way, and there you will sit. So you're gonna have to make some decisions now, and you can write this down. You do not have to believe everything you think. If you have a thought that is meant to keep you stuck, like, I don't love myself enough, therefore I have to binge eat, you are allowed to put it down. Give yourself permission to change. All right, number 2, second question. This one is from Maria. She says, how to have a better relationship with food and be a healthy version of myself with no medications and all of the various diagnoses that she has. Valid question. Great one. And a very similar question to a lot of other women that we work with. In fact, there is a podcast episode with our student, our Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery student, Lori. I want to say it's number 17. Look back and you'll see a podcast episode that is called How to Get Off of Prescription Meds. And it's a really, really great episode. Lori is such an amazing testimony to how self-discovery works. And she was able to decide, and she went to her doctors and she said, this is my plan. Like, I want to change the trajectory of my future. This is what I want to do. And so she became an advocate for her own best interest. And that's really how you change, right? If you're just going to a physician and you're saying like, okay, they're telling you this is what you have, and you're like, okay, what do I do? And then you're just kind of there and they're telling you exactly what to do. You're allowed to have a part in that. And Lori didn't know that for years until she decided to step into her own power. She decided, hey, hang on a minute. I want to have a say in this. And then she decided to work with herself instead of against herself. So she became her own best advocate. There's a really, really big part in this that you have, and you've got to be able to figure that part out. So Maria, again, says how to have a better relationship with food and be a healthy version of myself. A lot of people wish this. They want to be healthy. They're like, I want to live a long life. I want to play with my grandchildren. I want to go on those hikes. And, I want to be able to do things. And I can't because now I've got all of these various medical problems. And I totally get that. I totally hear you. And I want you to know that the step one for you, if this is your circumstance, is to make certain that you want to have a better relationship with yourself first, instead of telling yourself that you want to have a better relationship with food. So let me explain this. A lot of people will tell themselves that if I could just have a better relationship with food, then I could lose some weight, and then I could have a better relationship with myself. So this is a similar question. If you see, it's just put into different wording that Sarah had, because she was like, okay, well, I realize I don't love myself enough and I'm sabotaging myself. And when I sabotage myself, I don't have confidence because then I've got this weight on me and it doesn't feel good and all that stuff. Well, this is the same question in just a different way. So it's like, instead of thinking about it as having a better relationship with yourself first, you're putting your kind of bet on food. It's like, if I could just have a better relationship with food, then I could have a better relationship with myself. Then I could be healthier. And then I could, free myself from all of these diagnoses that I have. And I could get off of these meds. And so you're putting a lot of like the food is getting a lot of credit. And we have to be able to think about wording, because words matter. When we teach you in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, we will teach you how to interpret your own words. Because I didn't realize before I started my journey of self-discovery how many words that I was using that were actually meant to keep me not only stuck, but confused. Think about the wording of what Maria is saying here. I want to have a better relationship with food. And then really think about what the word relationship means. It's a mutual word. It's a relationship. So there's got to be like one part and there's got to be another part. It's between two things. There's an even exchange of energy. And in a relationship, there's got to be a reciprocation of feelings, right? You don't have a relationship with a chair, And honestly, even like a little child would have a relationship with their blanket or their stuffed animal or whatever. And yet we know as an adult that that's an inanimate object. And it's not like the child can't love the teddy bear or whatever, but the teddy bear is not really loving the child back. I know we have the wonderful movie Toys, and it's a very fun thing to think about. And yet it's just not like the truth. The teddy bear, the toy, the food, whatever, it's not loving you back. And so when we have this thought in our head that we want to have a better relationship with food, boy, oh boy, are we tricking ourselves. It's literally like a denial of what a relationship is. And so when you're coming in with this mindset, you have to and I mean you have to, stop yourself from telling yourself that you want to have a better relationship with food, because that would be ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. And believe me, please know when I say this with the absolute most amount of love and support, because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to have cookies calling your name. I know it. And I also know now that those cookies were not calling my name. That was all me telling myself that, so that I had a thing to blame, so that way I could keep myself continuing on the same pattern that I was for decades. So a relationship, again, is with two mutual feelings. Food cannot have any feelings for you. It just doesn't work that way. So you're going to have to stop saying that you want to have a better relationship with food to be a healthy version of yourself. And you're going to have to start saying that you want to have a healthy relationship with yourself. And then you'll naturally want to choose foods that align with someone who's not on medication and who doesn't have those various diseases or diagnoses, whatever. Our student Lori, she ended up deciding that she wanted to start moving more, and she wanted to start, eating more in alignment with the version of herself that was starting to heal and that was starting to love herself more. And so what ended up happening with her is that she had these heart problems and she was on medication for them. And because she started loving herself right where she was at, she decided that she wanted to take better care of herself. Well, that meant that she had to start moving more. She wanted to, and she wanted to eat more naturally. So instead of having packaged foods and different things that were causing her to feel really disconnected with herself and lethargic and have these sugar spikes, she decided that she didn't want to do that anymore. So she started to naturally feed herself things that would be more in alignment with somebody who wants to take care of themselves. And when she started to do that, her body started to release weight. Well, what ended up happening is that because the medications that she was on were meant to keep her slow and, her heart rate lower, she started like fighting against the medications and actually ended up having some complications because she was wanting to move more than her medication would allow her to. So she had to go ahead and change all that. But her step one was to start loving herself enough to want to take care of herself. And that's how you're going to clear up that problem, because the body, given half the chance, will heal itself. It's just that you have to give it half the chance. And if you're banking your money on you having a better relationship with food, well, that's just not going to work. You will have to decide that you want to have a better relationship with yourself first, so that then you'll decide that you want to choose to put things inside of your human body, or you'll decide that you want to get up and put on your walking shoes as opposed to sitting on the couch and scrolling through Netflix or Instagram or whatever, watching, your favorite show for hours and hours and hours, right? So those are the choices that you'll make when you decide that you want to have a better relationship with yourself first. And then everything else becomes so easy. All right, number 3. This is a question that came in from Beth, and it says, how to have better self-care in responding appropriately to my feelings. Now, I really like this one a lot. And I chose it because Beth here realizes that it's more to it than just the food. Beth realizes that if she is not able to respond appropriately to her feelings, then she's not going to take really good care of herself. Like, she realizes that, Like she wants to have better self-care because she's not responding to her feelings well. So I want to give you permission here to tell yourself that you're allowed to feel your feelings. Now, I know that a lot of people who struggle with emotional eating, they tell themselves that they are using food to stuff down their feelings, numb their feelings, hide their feelings, I don't know, suffocate their feelings. Like they don't want to feel their feelings. And they're basically using food to stuff all those feelings down. Well, considering that you're a human being and all feelings are meant to be felt, that's a really, 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 really bad idea. And I know this because I did it. And honestly, it didn't really work. It kind of felt like it did, but it really didn't, because all it did was make me feel like I had this deep, dark, shameful secret. I felt like I had like a 50-ton shield on me, and I really felt isolated. And it was because I was doing that to myself. So I set up a ton of walls around me. I could feel myself doing it. It was like I didn't want to feel those darn feelings. I was scared of them. And because I was scared of them, I made them super real. And now I know that fear is just false evidence appearing real, and that all of the thoughts that I had in my head that were scary and that were giving me permission to tell myself that I didn't want to feel those feelings, and then giving me permission to eat my feelings, all of that was just a really, really big way for me to stay stuck in denial of my own ability to be a human being. It was like I didn't want to allow myself to be human. And that's not really nice. I considered myself to be more super than human. I was like, I felt like I could be this superhuman. But you know what? That was really damaging to my self-worth, my good feelings about myself, my ability to, be on this earth. It made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be born somehow. And that's not really true. So if you're feeling like this and it makes you feel like you can't take better care of yourself, I want to validate how that feels. And I know that if you're starting in that place, it might feel like there's no way out of it. And I want to really give you just inspiration to know that that's not true. I felt that too. And there is a way out. And you are going to have to do one thing for yourself, just one. And I've said it already in this podcast about 3 times. Meet yourself right where you're at. And then the second thing, and I've said this a couple of times too, open your mind, because a closed mind cannot accept any new ideas. So there is science-based research on the fact that feelings, for real, like actual feelings, can only be felt for 90 seconds unless you fuel them with a thought. This was like eye-opening to me when I learned this. I was like, what? How can you say that? I feel my feels forever. If I'm sad, I could carry that on for weeks. What are you talking about? Feelings can only be felt for 90 seconds. How's that possible? And yet, when I really thought about the last part of the sentence, until you fuel them with a thought, I was like, oh my gosh, all of my thoughts are fueling them. Like that's all I'm doing. I'm ruminating and ruminating and ruminating and spinning around with the same old stories over and over and over again. And so the whole first thing that you'll have to do here, Beth, is I want you to change your question to, how can I learn to feel my feelings so that I don't want to fuel my feelings with thoughts that lead me to not want to take care of myself? Because your question was about how to have better self-care in responding appropriately to my feelings. Well, the only thing that you have to do to be able to do that is to give yourself permission to feel. That's it. And if you write down, all feelings are meant to be felt. And if you write down, a feeling can only be felt for 90 seconds until you fuel it with a thought. And then you can even do a activity that we have in our Crush That Food Thing self-discovery system. And I'll just share it with you here. It's called a brain dump. Brain dump. If you can do what's called a brain dump, and what that means is that you would write down all of the thoughts that you have in your head that are causing you to continue to feel your feelings for longer than that 90 seconds, and all of the worries and all of the stress and all of the doubts and all of the voices that, told you weren't good enough, and, everybody that ever made fun of you, and all the insecurities, like just write them all down. And then once you can do that and you can see them all, you might start with, 5 thoughts. And then suddenly you're going to be like an explosion of thoughts. And you're just going to start writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And then you're going to realize you're like, oh my gosh, it's like I have so much ammo against myself. I have so many things that I can fuel these feelings with instead of actually just feeling them and giving myself permission to feel them. That's the thing, right? I didn't give myself permission to feel them. I armored up. I was like, I don't feel anything. I'm going to just numb myself. Well, that doesn't work. And you can see it doesn't work because most of us who are in this emotional eating space have been stuck in the same space for decades. And remember, if you've, heard my background story, I was a personal fitness trainer and I knew nutrition really, really well, and I taught it. But I also did not realize with awareness that I had an emotional eating issue, or even further than that, I had a binge eating disorder. I didn't really know that. I just thought that I was like everyone else, and like cookies called my name and I couldn't control myself and all that stuff. But the thing is that I didn't realize that lurking through that habit of, binge eating and strict dieting and hiding things from myself and, telling myself I couldn't be trusted and, lying to myself. And I didn't realize that like I was just using the food to keep myself stuck, standing in my own way. And I never put the 2 and 2 together. And that's why when I first took a journey of self-discovery and I started taking self-discovery courses and I started to learn more about myself, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these things that I ruminate about and I tell myself over and over again. It was like, instead of living like 100 years, right? Like think of your time span of your life, right? I'm born and then I guess the goal is like 100. Instead of living 100 separate years, it was like I was living 1 year 100 times. And I kept going back over and over and over. The one time that somebody said this to me, or the one time that I did that thing that I couldn't forgive myself for, or all of the guilt and the shame and like everything that was buried underneath there. And then wanting to have, better relationships with other people, and then just not realizing where I was having such a poor relationship with myself that all of those thoughts were just contaminating my mind for decades. And that I was the one thing standing in my own way. And that's why I wasn't taking really good care of myself. That's why I wasn't able to have a best self-care for myself. That's why I barely slept and and why I would starve myself and then, contaminate my body with all kinds of crap food and chemicals. And like, that's why I was doing all that stuff. But I never really attached the 2 and 2 together between my feeling thing and my food thing. I didn't know they were related. And now I know better, so I can do better, which is really what we teach here in our signature program, actually, Crush That Food Thing self-discovery system. So the last question comes from Anne. And this one says, I want to feel in control of how much I eat. Actually, let me reframe that. I think we have one more question after this. Okay, so I want to feel in control of how much I eat. So this is a great question that I'm going to say like 90% of the people who I coach come in with. And my first suggestion here, and this is just a bit of what we teach, is to change your goal, first of all. So I want you to feel free of whatever you're doing. So I don't ever want to suggest to anybody that your goal would have the word control in it. So if you can kind of stick with me here, I want you to learn how to stay in alignment with your own integrity so that you naturally will never want to overeat, simply because you will be able to love yourself and like yourself way, way, way too much. So you'll never want to leave yourself. You'll never want to abandon yourself. You'll be free to make choices. Like honestly, today I went to a little swimming thing in the morning and they had all these cookies there. And so I had a cookie and I took 2 home. They are sitting on my countertop over there right now. I'm not in control of myself. I'm just free to eat them if I want to. I can eat one, I can eat a piece of one, I can leave them there for 3 days and then decide that I don't want them at all and throw them away. Like I'm free. There's no control. And the reason why I want you to change your goal, and I'm going to give you a little exercise, and you might have heard this in other podcasts, and it's totally fine. I want you to think of the word control, and then I want you to think of that word freedom, right? Because I'm free. And if you feel like you want to feel in control, I want to suggest that you change that thought. And here's why. If you write the word control down, and then right underneath it, you write the word freedom down. And like I said, I'm free. So I know that what I have is really, really, really useful for my actual life. And so if your goal is to be in control, I want to steer you into a wider level of thinking than that. Like I want you to actually think bigger. So you've got your word control, and right underneath it, you've got your word freedom. Then you're going to draw a line down the middle of your page. You're going to write the word love, and then you're going to write the word fear, and then you're going to play a matching game. So does control and freedom, which one does it match with? Love or fear? And so what we teach in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System is that control will always be attached to fear, and if freedom is attached to love. And the reason why I know this is, again, like I said, if I'm sitting here doing this podcast right now and I'm feeling in control because I'm not going to eat those cookies right now, I'm going to have to continuously feel afraid that there's going to be a moment of weakness where then I'm going to have to get up and get those cookies. I don't feel that way because I'm free. And the reason why I'm free is because I like myself and love myself enough to make a really, aligned decision with myself to know that if I choose to eat that cookie, I'm not going to shame myself. I'm not going to blame myself. I'm not going to guilt myself. I'm going to have no regrets. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. And there's going to be no aftermath. So I'm not going to be fueling my feelings because there are not going to be any feelings that go along with my decision because I trust myself, because I like myself, because I have my own best interest at heart. And so this is why I really would like you to change your goal about wanting control. Because if you stay in that path, you're just thinking too small. I want you to think bigger than that. And our last question from one of our listeners, and this is from Laura, is to have other ways to meet my needs which don't involve food at all. All right, so as we teach in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, and again, this is just something that we teach in our own community. So I want to make certain that you know that nothing that I share here is anything if your therapist or your doctor or somebody else has a different opinion on this. And if you want to think a different opinion on it, that is okay. We give you this as a suggestion because we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of women now. And this thinking process helps you to be able to take small little steps towards freedom. So as we teach in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, the word need ends up being similar to a child's word. And what I want you to do is I want you to change the word need to want, because want has power. Want is an adult mindset. It's like need has that feeling of desperation, that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of like, I need to do this. And it is actually a fear-based thought. So if we can change the word need to the word want, that would be the first thing that I would like you to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down your name and you're going to say, this is what I want. So if I was doing this, I would say, Lisa, what do you want? Then I would write down the numbers 1, 2, and 3. And then I would decide what I want based on these 3 guidelines. Number 1, you cannot want to change your weight. Can't be anything to do with your weight. Number 2, you cannot want to change your circumstances. Like it can't be like, I want to move to a different state because if I'm in a different state, like then I'll feel better. And if I feel better in a different state, then I won't binge eat. Like you can't want to change anything about your circumstances. And you cannot want anyone else to change so that you can change. So you can't want, let's say, your partner to stop bringing home pizza every night, whatever. Like you can't want anybody else to change. So this is going to give you clarity to discover the things that you do want. So that way you can make clear decisions for yourself without feeling like your needs are all about food. So the question again was to have other ways to meet my needs, which don't involve food. So just the fact that you feel like you have these needs, and again, those needs feel like they're more of a child's mindset. It's like, it's a desperation. And I want you to change that to what do you want? Now, just as some suggestions, right? A lot of times people will say like, I want to feel good in my own skin. I want to have trust with myself. I want to like myself. I want to look in the mirror and say, I like you. And so those are empowering things. You don't need to do them and you want to, which is really, really cool. So that's what I would suggest for you, to just change the thought that you need and replace it with want. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this episode today. This was a really cool one to do this Q&A, and we can do more of these Q&As, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the show notes a Google form, and you can just kind of click on that if you want to ask a question and have it answered live on the podcast. So there's a couple of ways that you can take a first, next, right step. So that way we can continue this conversation. If you want, we can always have a conversation in private, and you would do that by booking what's called a food freedom discovery call. That's where you and I will just talk. It's a totally free call, no sales pitches here. I'm here to help because, like I shared with you on the podcast, I know what it's like to struggle with this emotional eating issue. And if we are constantly focusing on the food, then all you're going to get is more thoughts about the food. So I want you to be able to shift into empowerment so that you can focus on you. Speaking of empowerment, we have a free guide that's out right now, and that is called the 2025 Empower Me Planner. This is a really cool opportunity. And when you click on that free guide, it's actually going to lead you to a 2-hour workshop that I'm going to be doing in January. And if you are listening to this live and the timing that we're doing this workshop, it's going to be a really, really cool workshop for us to be able to manifest your goals for 2025. If you're listening to this at a different time, then that might not work for you. However, the free guide will absolutely be available. And as always, if you want to take a couple little bite-sized opportunities to work with us and you want to do that on your own, you can always sign up for the Mindset Makeover. It's a 21-day challenge to be able to learn how to stop eating your emotions. And we have an amazing new course out called Crush Cravings with Confidence Academy. And this is a really cool one. It's 25 lessons. They're self-paced. They're all individual. They all solve a very specific problem. So each one will come along with a worksheet, a workbook. Actually, it's an 84-page, beautiful workbook. And you can go ahead and grab that in the show notes. And if none of this feels like your jam, but you would like to chat, and you kind of like the email back and forth thing, you can just send me an email at lisa@coachlisacallahan.com, and I will be so happy to reach back to you, or you can send me a DM on any of the social channels. And the last thing is, if you could click the like, subscribe, share button, and leave me a comment on what you thought about this episode today. If you want more episodes like this, I would really love to hear from you. All right. That's it. Bye for now. All right, my beautiful friend. That brings us to the end of another episode from the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening today and took something from our conversation that you are going to put into immediate action. I love spending time with you and would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with at least one friend today who you think might be